Welcome to the African News Review podcast, where we cut through the noise and get to the truth. I am your host, Adesoji Iginla, and each week we are here to challenge the biases, prejudices, and misinformation in the Western press about Africa. Using historical context and contemporary insights, we set the record straight and reclaim the narrative. Tune in every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern as we uncover the real stories and reshape the conversations about Africa. This is the African News Review podcast, reclaiming Africa's narrative, one story at a time. Greetings, and welcome to another news review. I'm your host as usual, Adesoji Iginla, and with me back in the seat, which everyone was looking out to last week, is Brother Milton Allimadi. Welcome back.
Karibu. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, so we're glad to have you back. And first things first, how's the health?
We're doing good. We're back.
Okay. Yeah, we're back, staying out of trouble, hopefully.
Yes, sir.
Speaking of trouble, the medical system in Kenya seems to be in some sort of trouble, and that is where we go for our first story, brought to us courtesy of the German news arm, Deutsche Welle. It reads, Kenya halts kidney trafficking operation after DW report. A report by DW, which is Deutsche Welle, and other German media outlets puts the spotlight on a kidney trafficking operation based in Kenya. Now the government is launching an investigation. And it reads, Kenya's government confirmed on Thursday it will shut down kidney transplant operations at a clinic that has been in the spotlight for organ trafficking. This announcement came just days after the release of a report by Deutsche Welle and German media outlets, Der Spiegel and ZDF, on the Medihill Clinic in Kenya. Your initial thoughts before I delve into it?
Well, I don't know why they make it sound like it's a Kenyan phenomenon. Everybody listening or watching our show today, if you are in an African country, you know this is a global problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's, the level of economic desperation that our people are experiencing is what would make somebody willing to even engage in something like that. Now, there are some cases that are done, of course, unknowingly, you see, where patients go for some procedure and they're victims of organ theft, right?
Yep.
But there are also many cases of economic desperation where people are now selling organs just to make ends meet, you see? And it's an African crisis, and anybody who's maybe an outsider would not be familiar. But I'm willing to offer an exercise for anybody listening right now. Do Tanzania and put Tanzania and organ theft, right? Or organ trafficking, or kidney trafficking. Put Zimbabwe, put Nigeria, put Uganda. Uganda, in fact, was a bigger crisis than Kenya. Put any African country, and then the issue will become starkly clear. I'm not condemning the article. I think the article did a good job in forcing the Kenyans to take action. And of course, what is most likely that's going to be exposed is that senior officials in the ministries of health are probably involved in this and profiting from this. But what I say the article has a shortcoming is by making it appear as if this is something shocking that is only happening in Kenya.
Okay.
And that is what is missing in the article.
Okay, I'll go read a bit further. And it goes on. The report traced the path of organ sellers and buyers, analyzed documents, spoke with whistleblowers and medical practitioners, It uncovered an international network that exploited young Kenyans who were desperate for money, as well as old patients who were desperate for a life-saving kidney. The correspondent in Nairobi, Felix Maringa, reported that the Kenyan government's response was swift, starting with the shutting down of the organ transplant operation at the hospital. A new committee, in quote, a new committee had been put in place that will investigate the ethical practices of Mediheal Hospital, the governing system, and even client privilege when it comes to donation of kidneys, Maringa said. 2 government officials at the ministry had been suspended. The officials were believed to have tampered with a 2023 investigation of the hospital. Now that calls into question the audit process of the medical history, that all of a sudden you realize an investigation in 2023 was tampered with in 2025. What do you think?
Well, like when you are a bandit or a thief, and then you find out there's an investigation, what do? You go back to the scene of the crime and you try to wipe out any fingerprints if you forgot. You see, that's what they're doing. They're trying to wipe out the fingerprints. But as I said, the next story you're going to be hearing are the people who are profiting from this, people in the government who are also profiting. And let's see if they take action against them and arrest them. And of course, it's going to be difficult not to, because if you go after the hospital knows who in the government was assisting them.
True. That's where it gets really tricky, because it means the culpability of the investigators in the investigation itself is called into question.
Absolutely. Either it's going to go forward or it won't. If it doesn't go forward, it means it went as high up as the presidency. But if the president is not involved, then heads will fall.
Okay.
Because it's now become an international scandal when it's published in a major international media network like this.
Now, in terms, we're looking at it through contemporary lens, right? So we're looking at a report based on an investigation that was done in Kenya. Could the parallels be drawn that for some reason Black lives don't really matter with regards to organ harvesting? Because we, like you said earlier, with the numerous cases you enumerated, this is science founded in colonial eugenics, as it were.
No, I don't think we have to go that far. I mean, look, hundreds of thousands of people are being killed in Sudan right now. What is being done?
Nothing.
Thousands of people being killed in Eastern Congo. What is being done? Cameroon, nobody even talks about that. A genocidal war by the French-backed government against the English-speaking region. Africans going to sell their labor in the Middle East are being enslaved. Women are being raped. Many are being killed and returning home as in coffins, you see? So you see, on the scale of things, it's clear that, of course, Black lives don't matter. And in fact, that's why it's hard for a story like this to get any media space, considering all the other tragedies that are befalling the African people. But without a doubt, this, I think, is a scandal that is bedeviling. Probably, I would be surprised if I'm wrong if I say every African country. You see? Because there's a demand for it. Wealthy people in other parts of the world, if they could even get you to donate your heart, they would be willing to pay you for that, you see? And mind you, we say this jokingly, but I can actually imagine a situation where somebody would be willing to sacrifice their heart if the money was good enough to take care of their family. You see? Think about this. It's not implausible. If young Africans, healthy Africans, are taking the risk of crossing the Mediterranean, knowing that the death rate is very high, but still doing that, that means they're in a position where whether they live or not is not the number one consideration. So if somebody is to offer them enough money, which could take care of their family for the rest of their lives in exchange for their heart, you don't think that some would be willing to do that? And that speaks to how desperate conditions are in many of our countries, unfortunately.
So in the report, doing some field research, it says the global organ trade is 1.7 billion. Although in a league, 1.7 billion. So if we put that into context, and there is enough incentive for just taking a quick break here on the African News Review podcast, but don't go anywhere. If you're enjoying our deep dive into the real stories behind the headlines, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern, we're here to debunk the myths and bring you the truth about Africa. Want to help spread the word? Share this podcast with your friends and leave us a review. It goes a long way in helping others discover the real Africa. Without further ado, let's get back to setting the record straight.
There's enough incentive, and then combined with what you just said, that Black lives don't matter. So, which means the enforcement against it is not going to be that critical. If the organ theft was coming from the United States and it is coming from European Americans, the reason why it doesn't happen that way is because it would not even be tolerated. You see,
So what we're saying,
I want people to think about this. I want people to always ask themselves, how have we arrived at this location? And I want them to be angry. And I want them to not think that when you have leaders, when you have a president, when you have a prime minister, when you have a government, that it is a privilege for them to be in that position. No, it is not a privilege. It's only a privilege if you don't put fire beneath their feet, because it means you do not think that they're there to serve you. You see? And that's part of the problem in African countries. There's the mentality that, oh, these are our big people. We should respect them. That's nonsense. They're not big. They're there to serve you, right? Because everybody cannot be president at the same time. Everybody cannot be a member of parliament at the same time. So you designate people to represent your interest. Right. That's why you vote for somebody to be in parliament, not for him to be there or her to be there, but for that person whom you vote for to represent the interest of thousands of people. Each member of parliament, thousands of people or tens of thousands of people, right? The president or prime minister, likewise, all of you cannot be president to represent your interest. That is why you select one person, you see? And if they're not delivering, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. They have to be removed, you see, until somebody is delivering and you allow them to complete the designated period that the Constitution allows them to operate. And in a country where the Constitution is being abused, you hold them accountable to that as well. So what I'm saying is that we have to take a step backward and ask ourselves, why are all these things happening in our countries? It's because the people who are supposed to prevent it from happening are not delivering, right? So let's go to the root of the crisis in all of our countries, and then we can start making a significant difference.
Okay, so essentially you've taken the question I was going to pose earlier, which is how do you ensure that foreign doctors, often allowed unchecked access to Africa's medical healthcare system, are audited? Because if there was an investigation in 2023 and the government is only now checking them in 2025, that's 2 years of unmitigated medical malpractice. 2 years.
That's only one industry. If something like that is happening in just one industry, what else has been hidden, concealed? You see? And that's where we go to the issue of media as well. Why are we discussing something initiated by DW? Or what about all the domestic local media? You see? What is going on? If our media cannot protect our people,
What's the use
we
of
have
them?
serious, serious problems.
Yep. What's the use of them?
And now, like you and I, we are having this conversation right now. We're discussing issues that impact different African countries, correct?
Correct. Yep.
We do not need a multi-million-dollar investment like back in the days of brick and mortar, old school. So I cannot accept the excuse that there are no domestic media people that should be exposing these kinds of scandals, And I'm not just specifically talking about Kenya, of course. I'm talking about all
Across the
our
continent.
countries.
Yeah.
Tell us the stories that need to be told. Part of the problem is sometimes we do not initiate. We wait for what the European highlights as something which is important. And then we run there to report it ourselves as well. Right?
Echoing their words.
No, we can't operate like that. They should be reporting on something that you expose, and then they amplify it, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yes.
Okay, speaking of amplification, we go to East Congo for the next story, and a publication we've not gone to yet since we've started here, and it's the Wall Street Journal. It says, it's titled, While War Rages, Congo's Neighbors Smuggle Out Its Gold and Mineral Wealth. Its lead writes, vast country struggles to prevent Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda from seizing valuable assets. And the story is filed in by Nicholas Barrio. And it starts, Kampala, Uganda. During the 19th century scramble for Africa, European countries raced to secure territory and wealth across the continent. Now, African powers are grabbing resources from a neighbor crippled by infighting and ill-equipped to defend itself. Caught in the middle is the Democratic Republic of Congo, a country the size of Western Europe, whose forest conceals a wealth of gold, diamond, and coltan, a key component in smartphones and computers. These mineral riches are turning what was already a region plagued by militia violence into a battleground, as Rwanda and its local allies seize coltan supplies while Uganda and its proxies move to take over gold mines to the northeast, according to United Nations and Uganda officials. This is something we've talked about with regards to the seemingly opportunistic and quote-unquote rebel activity, as it's often reported in the West, especially led by Rwanda, but we all know Uganda also plays a role. Knowing fully well that that's the case, why do you think this story was put out? I mean, let's begin there.
All right, so this is my assessment. I think, of course, the Wall Street Journal is very well connected to the U.S. establishment, right? So the Wall Street Journal, I personally, my reading of this is that the article was sending a signal to both Rwanda and Uganda, the leadership in those countries, General Kagame in Rwanda and General Museveni in Uganda, by explicitly showing the theft of Congo's resources at the expense of the deaths in the short term, thousands of people, but in the long term that this war has been going on, millions of Congolese people killed and displaced. And they're tying this connection very explicitly in the Wall Street Journal, and the Wall Street Journal is, of course, close to the U.S. establishment. in the past, they would prefer to have Republican administration. I'm not sure they're very thrilled right now with the current president and his actions regarding the economy, because they're the Bible of finance, right?
Mhm.
But nonetheless, at the end of the day, they would probably prefer him to a Democratic administration. I think that they're sending signals to both Rwanda and Uganda that things are going to change. And subsequently, I think things have begun to change already. With the visit to the region of President Trump's advisor for Africa, who toured the region, I think around the time that this article actually was being prepared. So I think they knew, of course, that he was going to be going to the region. And I think they had an indication that after his visit, things are going to change. So that's my reading of this article, that this kind of genocidal stealing is going to end. And if you look carefully, you have not seen any more headlines by the BBC, which was cheerleading this invasion, because I think the original plan was to march all the way march all the way to the Congolese capital, or march to such an extent that the military of the Congo would overthrow the government, just out of desperation. I think that's what they had in mind, to get rid of Shekedi ultimately. I don't think that is likely now.
Okay.
Yeah, so that to me explains the timing of this.
Okay, so let's read a little bit more of what the Wall Street Journal alleges. It says, the official says Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni and Rwanda's President Kagame are pouring troops and weapons into Congo, while their Congolese allies, who control strategic border crossings, secure smuggling routes to move more minerals to the global markets. The influx began 3 years ago when Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi invited Ugandan troops into Congo to fight an Islamic State-allied rebel group based in the woodlands. Which woodlands? Straddling the border between the two countries. Uganda's military is considered amongst the most competent in Africa, and at the time, Tshisekedi thought Museveni forces will help him achieve the rapid and robust solution to the region's long-running insurgencies he promised when he assumed office in 2019. Just read a bit more. Instead, the deployment prompted Rwanda to launch its own 2022 incursion using a once sleepy Congo rebel group known as M23 as a deniable cover, and the situation quickly escalated. So it begins to tell us what is happening in terms of movement.
No, as I said, this is as explicit as they have been.
Yes.
Recently, they're saying it as it is. That yes, there is M23, but this was a sleepy outfit. That, of course, meaning it could not operate on its own.
Yeah.
And Rwanda is using them as a cover, which is what we've been saying explicitly for the last several weeks. And I'm glad there's now a convergence. The hypocrisy is now, evaporating, you see?
So I suppose the question one would ask is, we now know what we know, or confirm, our original fears have been confirmed in terms of what is happening on the ground. The question is, there seems to be no movement to change the situation on the ground, other than people just speaking to what is going on.
Well, I think after the visit, there have been changes. I think he came back, and let's see, okay. So Trump's advisor, right? He went to Congo. He went to Rwanda. He went to Uganda. And he said some very important things. And if you read what he said and you connect them together, then you know what he said in each capital.
Yeah.
Because he came back and he said, M23 seized, I think, a town called Wakilil or something like that.
Yeah, Wakilil and Rukaya.
And as a result, a North American company shut down its operations.
Ooh.
And the price of tin went up by 30%. And that was not good.
Inconvenience in the imperium.
And M23 subsequently has now withdrawn. And the price of tin is now coming back to its average, right? And he said, which is very good for American business. And he said, there are going to be more American businesses operating in the Congo. And for us to escalate our operation in the Congo, we need infrastructure. We're already supporting the Lobito, and now we're going to build more infrastructure in the Congo, which will be good for the Congolese and for American investments.
Wow. Okay.
And Rwanda needs to withdraw from the Congo. He said that explicitly. And M23 needs to withdraw. And Rwanda needs to stop exporting. And I went to, and we met with Kagame. It was a good meeting. And I told him that every country in the region needs to have their sovereignty respected. And you see, so that's a very key word.
Sovereignty
And you
respect.
cannot be occupying somebody's country and respecting their sovereignty at the same time. You see? And then from there, I went to Uganda. So it's clear that he told both Museveni and Kagame that they need to get out of Rwanda. You see? And then he also said, in terms of Congo trying to ally with China, we're going to see who ends up being the best partner for the Congo and the most reliable partner. And let me tell you, it's going to be the United States. So if you connect all these words, it's very clear that they've made a decision to move ahead with the mineral deal and with the Congo. And they've made it clear that they don't want Rwanda's army and Uganda's army to be interfering with their operations in the Congo. So I think in the next, in the coming days, we'll see some of this in the media coverage going forward. And I know this is, of course, a disappointment to the BBC. But
So
there you go.
For the outsiders looking in, I'm going to ask a funny question, which I do have the answer to, but I want you to speak to.
Yes.
Was it that none of the AU countries have stepped in and effectively decide, you know what, this is untenable?
Well, I'm glad you asked the question, because he said, I want to commend the AU for their efforts. They tried their best, is what he said. You see? So he was anticipating, journalists like you asking questions. He said they tried their best. The SADC also, they tried their best. The EAC countries, they also tried their best.
Because the reason I
But at the same time, it can only mean that there's going to be something different that is going to be tried.
Such as?
I have no idea. Let's wait and see what he says. But I think there are two ways of doing it. I mean, if you tell Rwanda to withdraw, of course they're going to withdraw. Rwanda cannot confront the United States. That's very clear.
Yeah.
You tell Museveni to withdraw, he's going to withdraw. They cannot confront the United States. They just can't, you see? So now, are you saying that based on these marching orders alone, then there's going to be, security, and that's it? Maybe that's a level of confidence they have, unless you're going to expand your military presence in the region, which is, of course, the other alternative. And then, of course, don't forget, these guys, they like using drones too. They like using drones. They've been using it a lot in Somalia. Might that be a third alternative as well? But it seems to me that they've made it clear that they are going to have expanded business interest in the Congo. And obviously, they would not want that to be disrupted. And he gave one example of how M23 disrupted the production of tin, and said now that they withdrew, he said that was a good thing. So I can't imagine it reversing and M23 starting to occupy other locations after this visit and after he's already said that was a good thing for them to withdraw. So I think the balance has shifted dramatically compared to just a few weeks ago.
Okay.
When the BBC, I think even The Economist interviewed, I forget the guy's name, the M23 guy, in some hotel, in Goma, and we were talking about the tone of this interview, while people are being killed, treating this guy literally like one of their friends. I doubt we will be seeing those kind of interviews in the near future.
Okay. I mean, listen, that interview was borderline insensitive and totally uncalled.
Absolutely.
It was
but
simply
that was still,
what?
With the belief that these guys might actually go all the way. I think that's the thought that the usual suspect media were entertaining at that time.
So it's quite uncomfortable that Congo itself, owing to its history, especially in light of Patrice Lumumba, is seeking safety in the embrace of the United States. The mind boggles, but
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with you totally. So it's very ironic that Uganda and Rwanda, Museveni and Kagame, they have become the new King Leopold, right? And Congo now has
African
to run to another imperialist power. And I guess you could equate it this way. Remember when Congo was a private estate of King Leopold II of the Belgians? And he was so genocidal and homicidal in his administration that they took the territory away from him and made it an official colony of the Belgian state. So I guess you could draw an analogy today and say Museveni's and Kagame's genocidal war against the people of the Congo have been so terrible that their solution is to take it away from Museveni and Kagame and give it to Donald Trump. You see?
That was a horror.
So history is repeating itself, absolutely.
God. Well, speaking of history repeating itself, or might not repeat itself, we go to South Africa for the next news, which comes from the BBC, and it reads, your president's right-hand man is in the news. So it's Elon Musk. BBC writes, racially charged row between Musk and South Africa over Starlink. And it reads, the tussle between Starlink's boss, Elon Musk, and South Africa over the company's failure to launch in the country stems from the nation's black empowerment laws and could be one factor behind the diplomatic row between the US and Africa's most industrialized nation. To his more than 219 million followers on his social media platform X, Mr. Musk made the racially charged claim that his satellite internet service provider was not allowed to operate in South Africa simply because I am not black. But the Independent Commission Authority of South Africa, NCASA, a regulatory body in the telecommunications and broadcasting sector, told the BBC that Starlink had never submitted an application for a license. As for the Foreign Ministry, it said the company was welcome to operate in the country provided there is compliance with local laws. Your initial take on what his claim is? The fact that he was not of a certain hue.
No, I mean, these mere apartheid is what he wants to impose in South Africa. That's no secret. He wants to impose new apartheid. He opposes the black economic empowerment. He's always opposed that. And black economic empowerment means if you're going to invest, you have to be in partnership with South Africans. So what he's saying is that I don't want to work with black people. I just want their money. You know, that's what he's saying. You know, it's really disgusting
Okay.
when a European who has profited from the blood of Africans, plays the race card, right?
I mean, we see the same thing playing out in the United States. This false outrage and reversed victimhood.
Right. It's just diversion.
So
It's a diversion. Remember I told you that story when I was a kid? Remember I told you that? When I was a kid, I went to my mother's family's village. And one day, I'm here, how they chase thieves, right? So this guy's running. The guy was fast, man. The guy could have been a professional athlete. And now, whole community chasing behind him, right? And yelling, thief, thief, catch him, thief. And I just entered the road and he's coming like straight toward me and other people who had come to see. And the guy who's running, he's pointing ahead also and yelling, thief, thief, thief. So some people joined him and started chasing a phantom thief ahead when he was the one with the thief. That's exactly what this guy has been doing. The guy is a racist and he accuses Africans of being racist. It's but you know what? In a way, because I am like Sankara in my convictions. When you discuss an issue or problem, you have to look at the solution, right? The solution can only come from us. Was it a step in the right direction for the ANC to go in bed with the DA party? Of course not. That was a total betrayal. But when you do something like that, they're going to pile on you. And that's exactly what they're doing. I think the piling on is going to become unsustainable. I am willing to be the first to say that the alliance between the ANC and the DA is either a matter of weeks or a matter of months before it is dissolved. There's some things worth fighting for, right? Look at what happened here.
And this is not one of them.
Absolutely. They have to resist him. Otherwise, they're finished, the South Africans. Look at what happened here. When President Trump went after Columbia University, they rolled under the bed and he kept piling the demands, correct? Went to Harvard. Harvard was beginning to hide under the bed as well. And then he made these demands that nobody can accept. And that's when Harvard drew the line and said, you know what? Let's get it on. We're going to fight. That's what Columbia should have done. And now, because of the position that Harvard has taken, more universities are either taking that position or joining an alliance with other universities to resist collectively. You see? So I'm hoping South Africa does not yield. Otherwise, this would be the end of the ANC and DA alliance. But on the other hand, I mean, obviously it's an alliance that I don't think would lead them anywhere. But at the same time, I don't want it to come also at the expense of giving this racist, that kind of market clout in South Africa.
I'll just take a bit more from this news article. And it goes on to say, so the question now, what are the legal sticking points? To operate in South Africa, Starlink needs to obtain network and service licenses, which requires 30% ownership by historically disadvantaged groups. This mainly refers to South Africa's majority black population, which was shut out of the economy during the racist systems of apartheid. White minority rule ended in 1994 after Nelson Mandela and his ANC African National Congress came to power. Since then, the ANC has made black empowerment a central pillar of its economic policy in an attempt to tackle racial injustices of the past. So it just goes to show that this character is just seeking to undermine the very fabric of what would put the country on a better standing footing. And what it's the mind boggles that it is that very thing that you expect to be bent for you. This kind of ownership is not unique to South Africa. The United Arab Emirates in the Middle East, you can't have a wholly business owned 100%. You have to go into partnership with a local. So why is this a sticking point in Africa?
Because it thinks the governments are weak, and it's ironic. This is it. So they, in the past, they've condemned the black empowerment programs. So this just promotes cronyism and corruption, right? Now you want to defy the laws of investment in that country, and you're telling me that's not corruption and cronyism? And in any case, what was more corrupt than having the apartheid system in South Africa? They'll say anything just to legitimate and justify continued exploitation. And that's unacceptable.
I mean, it's the fact that you have the president meeting with him thereafter when the laws of the land has been called into question. I don't care how rich you are. You don't get to tell the country how things run. The laws are the laws. And if the laws have been there before you arrived, we shouldn't have to bend for you. If you value your investment and you want to invest in the market, then you play by the rules. The laws are there for a reason.
Absolutely.
So I don't know if you have anything else to add before we go to our last piece.
No, I think the sad thing is the AU does not have a uniform investment policy. Otherwise, we would not even be having this conversation. They need to have a uniform investment policy when it comes to some industries, like technology like this. Because what he's going to do, which is already doing, is going to go to other African countries and twist their arms, and he's going to get deals for a satellite company. And then if he ends up getting it in 40 out of the 54 countries, then, mission accomplished. And that should not be allowed to happen. If you had a uniform African Union investment policy, goes back to what I said in the beginning. If our leaders are acting like they're our enemies, why should we allow them to be in leadership?
Question.
We should not.
Good question.
We should not.
Good question.
They have no right. They have no right to make us suffer. Let's put it this way.
I mean, in some cases, we have no say in the matter because if they've come to power through the gun and the bullet,
right?
They're calls into question what other means of reproach do we have. We don't. Basically, we're powerless. And most African countries have this thing about, not wanting to upset the apple carts before, because
but our domestic citizens, they can take action. Our citizens can take action. I mean, Kenya, the youth showed in Kenya that the government is only as strong as you allow it to be, and as weak as you allow it to be as well.
Speaking of weak countries, weak governments at the moment, we go for our final story to The Guardian, and it's from Sudan. And it's based on a UN report that says a leaked UN expert report raised fresh concerns over UAE's role in Sudan's war. As crucial London peace talks set to begin, report seen by The Guardian raises question over multiple flights into bases in Chad. Pressure is mounting on the United Arab Emirates over its presence as a crucial conference in London aimed at stopping the war in Sudan after a leaked confidential UN report raised fresh questions over the UAE's role in the devastating conflict. The UAE has been accused of secretly supplying weapons to Sudanese paramilitaries via neighbouring Chad, a charge it steadfastly denied. However, an internal report marked highly confidential and seen by The Guardian detected multiple flights from the UAE in which transport planes made apparent deliberate attempts to avoid detection as they flew into bases in Chad, where arms smuggling across the border into Sudan had been monitored. This allegation raised complications for the British Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, who controversially invited the UAE alongside 19 other states for the Sudan peace talks at Lancaster House on 15th of April. The date marks the second anniversary of a civil war that has caused the world's biggest humanitarian crisis, displacing more than 12 million people. So, what do you think of, we've, in some previous episodes, we've highlighted the fact that they evolved, but the fact that the UN now is saying categorically, putting them in the dock, what do you think should happen?
I think at the end of the day, it will also depend on, and I like the fact that the meeting is being held in London, right? And at least for now, there's a good relation between the UK government and the US, right? And you know how it goes. It's a very personal thing, you know. So Trump still does not see the UK as enemies, right? Which means if the UK puts some pressure, the US will probably go along with that. See? Because the UAE, they also, because of the business potential and all that investment potential, they also have a direct link to Trump, right?
Yeah, correct.
But if the UK is able to convince him that this war needs to stop and they're not going to deny you personal business opportunities, Mr. President, right? There's no way the UAE is going to stand up against Trump, right? If he has, he has personal business interests in the region and wants more, right? Just because they tell him, listen, stop supporting the RSF. So I think for that reason, things may change. Now that the UK seems to have taken a direct interest and putting its sort of reputation at stake by becoming that directly involved in the peace negotiation process. I think that's what was missing. So long as the talks were taking place in Nairobi, which of course is where it should be taking place, but the outside world was not taking that seriously. Just like the outside world was not taking seriously. Because sadly, when Africans don't take their institutions seriously, why should the outside world take it seriously?
Sure.
So you had SADC involved in Eastern Congo. Kagame was just brushing them aside, right? You have the East African community involved. These are just fellow Africans, Kagame, sweeping them aside. African Union, try more fellow Africans. Now you have the U.S. president sending his representative. Suddenly M23 is now withdrawing. You see? It's, I hate to say it that way, but those are the facts. You can't deny it. So what I'm saying is now that the meeting for the peace negotiations in Sudan is being held in London, maybe they'll not say these are just a bunch of fellow Africans. Oh, my brother. We live in a very sad statement on affairs in Africa.
Yeah. Nkrumah once said it that we have to remember that these people have not left. They're basically outside the window. And it's funny that some of us inside will be the ones handing the house china to them. So the likes of Museveni and Kagame are living testimony to what was predicted.
Absolutely. And look at this, another point. The African Union had a peace plan to end the NATO war on Libya, right? NATO, the United States, now it was their turn to say, oh, these are a bunch of Africans. So if we Africans keep saying, oh, these are a bunch of Africans, you should not be surprised if Europeans, who have been saying it for a long time, continue saying it as well. So at the end of the day, it's still on you.
So, I mean, again, I hate us to end on a sour note, but
no, it's not a sad note. It's actually a very constructive and positive note. We as Africans must not tolerate so-called African leaders who undermine our potential. The good thing is they are not representative of Africa. I know there are many Africans that have a different vision. This has been proven many times. Nkrumah, Lumumba, Modibo Keita, Thomas Sankara, Steve Biko, Robert Sobukwe, Nyerere, Mandela, Gamal Nasser, so many. So we should not use these guys as the measure of what Africa could or should be. We should see them as the obstacles. And we should make sure we replace that with some of the people that I just named. And there are many more. Samora Machel, Agostino Neto, the earlier version of Mugabe, so many.
Yeah, thank you for that uplifting end bit as opposed to the prior. And so, yes, ladies and gentlemen, those listening and watching, we've come to the end of another news review. I have to thank my comrade again for bringing his A game as usual.
Thank you, sir.
And until next week, comrade.
Aluta continua. And look at it this way. You have to read history. The more history you read, the more you'll see that as Africans, we need to remain confident and upbeat. Of course, the tragedies that we see are very disheartening. But also know that there's the long game. And the long game, it is our time. It is the African century will emerge. And history has always been like that. Britain had its day. The United States had its day. China is having its day. At the end of the day, all of them benefiting from Africa's resources.
Africa. Yeah.
Eventually, we will have the correct type of leaders that will allow us to use our resources for the first time in Africa's interest. That will happen. It's just a question of time, but it will happen. They cannot make the minerals, the resources disappear, and the talented Africans. We just have to keep striving to have the proper leadership, then nothing will stop us. So yes, I'm happy to be back and see you next week.
Yes, and see you all next week. Thank you for listening. And again, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And each one bring one, as we normally say. Thank you all for listening, and good night for now. That's a wrap for this week on the African News Review Podcast. We hope you are leaving with a clearer, more truthful picture of Africa. Remember, every story has another side, and we're here to uncover it. Don't forget to join us next Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern as we continue to challenge the narratives and reclaim Africa's voice. If you've enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep seeing Africa for what it truly is.